Hey there, church. Today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 22. We were supposed to get there. Oh, I forgot. I was supposed to put my special glasses on for today. Just kidding. Matthew chapter 22. Jesus, in the latter part of that chapter, talks about the two greatest commandments, a very familiar passage to us. Let's just read those verses for a moment, though, before we continue. Jesus says in verses, let's do 36 to 40. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Jesus answered him. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commands. Of course, an interesting section. The last part of that section, verse 40, actually looks back a bit to chapter 5, verse 17, and chapter 7, verse 12, when it talks about fulfilling the law and the prophets, and Jesus saying at one point, he says, I didn't come to abolish them. He says, I came to fulfill them, and of course we see that. But he describes love in a unique manner because he gets beyond the religious norm of the day of just fulfilling the rules of legalism and gets to the core of things. It's about devotion to God. That's what he's looking for. Devotion, heart, soul, and mind. Emotionally, volitionally, cognitively. On every level, to be devoted completely to him. Every fiber of our being devoted completely to him. He says that sums up the law and the prophets. That's what God looks for. And we see that back in the Old Testament. In fact, the Lord at one point says, do I not desire obedience over sacrifice? He says, yeah, the sacrifices are great, but obedience, he says, the heart issue, he says, that's what I'm looking for. And that's what he looks for in us as well. Hearts that aren't just going through the emotions or going through the just to do church or to do the Christian life, but who are absolutely 100% committed to him, sold out for him with every fiber of our being to live for him. Heart, soul, mind. And the question then that we have to ask, are there areas in our lives when we are not sold out, when we are not devoted to him? Perhaps in our emotions. Perhaps in our will. Our attitudes. Perhaps in our thought life as well. I don't know those areas. I can't perceive them. The camera doesn't allow me to do that. And quite honestly, I don't know that I would want to. I'll leave that up to God. But are we committed to him in everything? Second part of that, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's not talking about, of course, self-love. That's not what Jesus is encouraging here, but he's painting a mental picture, if you will, that if we were to love ourselves, to think upon those things that we would do and to practice that kind of attitude, that mentality, that tenor toward our neighbor. And of course, remember, he redefined neighbor for the Jewish community as well, because he extended it not just to those who were labeled themselves as Jewish, but even to the Samaritan, to the one that the Jews hated, to the outcasts of society. Those are their neighbors as well. Your enemies, those are your neighbors we are to love. And not wish a gooey, gushy, Hollywood kind of love, but a love that is sacrificial, a love that according to Philippians chapter 2, says that we are to consider the best of the other person above our own. Well, that was interesting. Yesterday I was kind of putting this off. I was having some struggles trying to put this together. Today as I was outside, all of a sudden a gust of wind came through and blew and took some shingles off my neighbor's house. Now I had a bunch of work to get done for church. I had some other things that the kids needed to go down for a nap, but in that moment, setting aside, thinking of them, and it almost came like an immediate reaction. All right, this is what I need to do. I need to go help them. I need to help them get some stuff nailed on. I had the tools, I had the stuff. Why not go do it? Why not serve in that capacity? That's what we're meant to do. And if we need if we need examples of what this looks like, we see it within Jesus himself. In John chapters, I'm forgetting it here, chapters 4, 15, and 14, talk about Jesus' love. Greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. We see him do that. We see his love for the Father, and how is that expressed? In doing the will of the Father. 1 John chapter 5, verses 2 and 3 talk about the fact that our love for the Father is expressed as we obey. And that we are to show that same kind of love that Christ has shown us toward one another. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Let's be quick to love. Not with the love that our world talks about today. Not a love that necessarily accepts sin. Sin is what it is. We have to call it what it is. But at the same time, we can choose to love people as God did. Jesus hung out with the outcasts, with the people in society that nobody would normally hang out with. And those are the ones that he showed compassion to. And how do we show that same compassion? And thus, in doing that, really love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, and mind. Those two things are connected together. As we do the one, we accomplish the other. You can't separate these two things. To love God with all our heart, soul, and mind is to love our neighbors as ourselves. To love our neighbors as ourselves fulfills this other. Just some thoughts to think about today. With everything that's going on right now, I was thinking as well the different opinions on everything, and there's a lot of stuff coming out right now about what's true, what's not true, creating a lot of conflict at the same time within our nation among people with some very passionately held opinions. How in the midst of that do we still show the love of Christ in a manner that promotes the gospel, the message that this God of the universe came and rescued mankind by dying for them, shedding his own blood, and that it is the epitome of his love for us. And that with everyone's future destiny in question today, that there is hope. There is hope in Christ. And how can we be positive in expressing that hope and leading people to that hope today? Love and miss you all. Until tomorrow. God bless.